Why does John MacArthur avoid political issues and politics? My name is Gary DeMar, and welcome to Vantage Point. On a website, I read an article that was published by some folks from John MacArthur's ministry, and the issue came up about John MacArthur and his seemingly reluctance to get involved in political issues, which really isn't the case. It's very true that John MacArthur does in fact speak on the issues of the day. In fact, there's a book that came out not too long ago called Right Thinking in a World Gone Wrong, which consists of 20 articles written by John MacArthur and other folks at his seminary. But we get a mixed message from John MacArthur. And again, I don't want to just pick on John MacArthur here, but this is pastors in general, and there are lots of reasons why pastors don't get involved in the political realm. A few years ago, John MacArthur wrote a book called Why Government Can't Save You, an alternative to political activism. And in this particular book, MacArthur, it seems on one page he says it's okay to get involved in politics. On the other page, he seems to say we really shouldn't waste our time on politics. This is really a book that commits the either-or fallacy, that, well, we should be involved in evangelism or we should be involved in political action. So I guess we could make the same comment about we should be involved in evangelism or we should be involved in, say, medicine. We should be involved in evangelism or we should be involved in journalism. Well, you start going down this either-or. It's either presenting the gospel, preaching the gospel, or this, and you really have disrupted the world in which God has made. Any profession under the sun is a calling that God has given us. Not everybody is called to pastor a church. John MacArthur is called to pastor a church, and that is something that he does very well, and that is his calling. I wouldn't expect John MacArthur to step out and be involved in politics in the sense of running for political office or getting behind a particular political party or setting up an organization, say like the Moral Majority that Jerry Falwell did in 1979. John MacArthur has a very specific calling. And I, for one, who does get involved in politics, and that is, I speak on that particular issue, I would never run for political office. And yet, so in my particular calling, I speak on these particular issues, but I'm not called to run for political office. John MacArthur, who is called to pastor in a church, obviously is going to come across political issues when he starts going to the Bible. I mean, there's the John MacArthur Study Bible. There he has all types of commentaries on the Bible. On his website it says he's published 150 books. So if you go through the Bible, you're going to end up dealing with the issue of politics. You can't avoid it. You go to 1 Samuel chapter 8. There's a chapter on politics. Where the people of Israel wanted a king like all the other nations. It wasn't wrong for them to want a king. God, in fact, had promised them a king. But this particular king was going to do certain things. He was going to tax them 10%. He was going to create conditions in which his sons and daughters would go off to war. Now, those are political issues, but those are broader worldview issues. We can't avoid the issue of politics because it is actually built in to God's way of dealing with society. You get to Romans chapter 13. The civil magistrate is called a minister of God. The civil magistrate is to make a determination between good and evil. How is he to do that? Does the pastor from the pulpit have anything to say about what took place in 1 Samuel chapter 8? Does the Bible have anything to say to the pastor when he deals with Romans chapter 13? You can't avoid dealing with the issue of politics. It's impossible to do. So, on the one hand, I would agree, John MacArthur has his particular calling. And on the other hand, I would disagree in that having that particular calling does not negate his involvement in the issue of politics, because as a preacher of the gospel, you cannot avoid the subject because the Bible is in fact filled with issues related to politics. If the eighth commandment says, "Thou shalt not steal," which applies to you and me as individuals, it also applies to the civil magistrate in not stealing. And so when a pastor gets up in the pulpit and starts addressing the eighth commandment, that eighth commandment applies to general taxation issues. You can't claim neutrality. You can't step back and say, I shouldn't be involved in politics. It's impossible. There were a couple of other things in this article that I found interesting. Apart from his commitment to talking about John MacArthur, apart from John MacArthur's commitment to those pastoral priorities, John has some further reservations about political involvement as a pastor. First, this article says, political involvement requires time and energy from a pastor that should be spent on shepherding the flock of God. And I agree. This isn't John MacArthur's calling. I don't expect him on Sunday and during the week to be involved in pastoral ministry and then run for political office on the side. But what he should be doing from the pulpit as a pastor, as shepherding the flock, he should be presenting what the Bible has to say about the realm of politics. If you get up in the pulpit and you talk about what the Bible says about self-government and family government and church government, how can you skip civil government, which has an impact on all of our lives? Whatever happens at the federal and state level regarding politics, regarding civil government, is going to affect all of us. It's going to affect how we live our lives, how we raise our children, how our property is managed, whether or not a war is going to be started and our children are going to be sent off to war. Second, this article states, effective politics requires co-belligerency to promote a common cause or resist a common enemy. He's saying in all of this, look, you Christians just can't do this by themselves. They're going to have to line up with other groups. Well, that may be the case. But there was a time when Christians led the agenda, and that this co-belligerency where people came in and supported the Christian view of things even though they didn't agree. So I think this shows how out of step Christians have been with politics for a very, very, very long time. They were the ones who set the agenda, and others came along and joined up with us. We didn't join up with them. Third, political changes at best are only superficial and temporary. He says the reforms of one generation or administration are quickly undone by the reforms of the next. The reason they're superficial and temporary is because Christians don't maintain a consistency with all of this. For the past 100 years or so, Christians have relegated the realm of politics to something that's dirty and outside of the realm of a Christian worldview. One of the ways we can make something permanent is by consistent vigilance in promoting our political views. Fourth, in this article it says, political involvement can easily confuse the message of the church. I think the message of the church is already confused. People think that the only reason I should come to Christ is that when I die I'm going to go to heaven. What does the Bible say about politics? What does it say about ethics? What does it say about journalism? What does it say about foreign affairs? There are a lot of people who dismiss the Bible because it isn't comprehensive enough. It only speaks to a very narrow slice of life. They'd rather go to some other realm, to secularism or to Islam, which speaks to every area of life. Fifth, political engagement often turns the church's mission field into the enemy. Look, the mission field is an enemy of the gospel as it is. We are to change hearts and we are to change minds. The question is, what happens to an individual after his heart and mind is changed? What does he do? What effect does he have upon his world? He has an effect upon himself and self-government. He should have an effect upon his family and family government. He should have an effect upon his church and church government. He should have an effect upon his church. As I mentioned, he should have his business, his circle of friends. But why not in the realm of politics? We as Christians should be involved in every facet of life. You don't have to make a big public display about all this. Since politics is mostly voting in the voting booth, it can be a very quiet thing where Christians take their understanding of the Bible that's preached from the pulpit in the realm of politics, go into the voting booth, and vote accordingly. It doesn't take that much energy or that much time if a pastor is doing his job. Now, one last thing, and I think this, again, governs so much of what is taking place in evangelicalism today because they don't see a long-term impact of politics, and one of the reasons is because they have shortened the future because of their eschatology. For example, in Right Thinking in a World Gone Wrong, MacArthur's chapter on God, government, and the gospel caught my attention. And here's what MacArthur says. and I'm quoting MacArthur on this, such political preoccupations are somewhat ironic considering the dominant premillennial eschatology of conservative evangelicalism. Our end times theology tells us that until Christ returns, nothing can or will fix this crumbling world system. Yet our political practice suggests we are desperately trying to fix it nonetheless. And again, I've been saying this for years. Eschatology matters. A lot of people who hold an end-time view, like John MacArthur, discount the future, and it affects everything in their life. What if our founders, those who left England, left Holland to come here to what is now the United States, had this particular view? We can't fix anything. We live in a world that has been fixed by Christians who understood that the Bible applies to every area of life. The fact that we have a First Amendment to the Constitution that says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, we're benefiting from that. John MacArthur's church in California, at least the way the Constitution was originally written, gives him protections from the state. We have, in fact, fixed all kinds of things as a result of the gospel. But again, I think a lot of people have disengaged in the realm of politics because they believe we're living in the end times. John MacArthur himself seems to indicate this, and by discounting the future, we have allowed secularists to take over nearly every realm of life, politics included.